I have a lot of sources. I don't want to give them up, but a lot of it came out in the newsletter, so I can say it now. Trump's doing face saving right now, saying, no, I made Israel attack first. Well, the Pentagon's like, no, we didn't want to attack during the day. And Rubio's like, yeah, they did it. Sorry. They're all freaked out about this. I know the chairman told him privately, he came on the news, this is a bad idea, don't do it. We'll follow your order, though, sir. But here's 70% bad options. We say don't do it. Then I confirm with others that Israel, basically Trump was like leaning on not doing the attack, so they did this. Now Trump is face saving because he wants to obviously do that, and that Trump got really pissed off. There's photos of him screaming at Hegseth, who I think overall is a good guy. But the bottom line is that I've confirmed that Israel is basically in control of our foreign policy by our own posture to be allied with them, and that is uncontrovertible, because now they're trying to do damage control. Oh no, Trump gave the order. No, our very doctrine is if Israel's attacked, we attack. And so thank God Russia's not following its agreement with Iran or China, or we'd be in war with them right now. So it is a fact. And then the neocons, the Israel lobbies all over the internet attacking anybody that points this out and tries to say it's not the case, while Netanyahu brags about it. So, I mean, that's the big news. I'm not even defending Trump. It actually makes him worse. That it is now literally true. What I claimed, well, I wanted to claim wasn't true because I don't want to believe it. That Trump is an errand boy of Israel. And how do we deal with that, Nick Fuentes?
Well, if Trump is an errand boy for Israel, then you got to shut down his government, and that means you got to go into the midterms and you got to get the Democrats in. And the Democrats hopefully will impede the administration. That's what they're going to do. They're going to launch investigations, subpoenas, select committee, all that kind of stuff. And they're going to grind it to a halt. And, if Trump is an operative of a foreign government, consider that he's forfeited his entire mandate, because his whole basis of support is that he's America first, MAGA. He's not like the other politicians. Okay, well, if you're an errand boy for Israel, if you're a puppet of the Jewish state and you're bringing us to war, for them, that's not like a small thing. That's not like a little bit of foreign aid. We're going to war on their behalf. He has to be opposed. And a lot of people don't want to take it there for one reason or another. But, I don't know what the option is. I don't know how you work with that. If you're America first and Trump is Israel first, well, that's not exactly a divide that can be bridged. There's not actually a middle ground between
No, I totally agree. So let me give you the good news. From my sources, there are many, Pentagon, White House, you name it. This is a firestorm. Trump is really pissed off. He doesn't even know what he thinks. That's why all these messages, notice the last few hours, the messages are all schizophrenic. Have you noticed that?
Yeah, all over the media.
So that's good news, at least. I think we've got to... What would you... I'm telling you, Trump will end up probably seeing this, because they respect you. I've met with them and stuff. I told you off record. Like, they've said the algorithms. They're paying attention to you, son. And I mean that in a nice way. What would you advise the president to do right now?
Well, it's tricky because we're in. So, you would have said never go in, but we're in now. Now that we're in, I think you got to hit Iran really hard and then you try your best to leave. But, again, it's like I said before, Israel is going to want us to push deeper and deeper into this until we have a full-scale regime change.
And then if we win, put assholes in to do it again.
Right.
We know we're under attack! We know it! We're breaking the conditioning!
If you could go through life in the Liberal Party without being expelled, you should be ashamed of yourself.
We will decide who comes to this country and the circumstances in which they come.
Socialists don't like ordinary people choosing, or they might not choose socialism.
120 years ago, our country had the world's highest per capita income. What the hell happened?
The answer is Mike, because I want to do you slowly. I want to do you slowly.
We're coming for you, globalist! Coming for you!
G'day everyone, welcome back to another episode of Commanding the Narrative. My name is Stephen Tripp. Thank you to everyone who is watching this. And of course, if you are watching this live, we want to hear from you in the chat if you're on Facebook, Rumble, or YouTube. Just like we always are live streaming, it's we want to do it raw and and unfiltered. So if you've got a comment, please, we want to hear from you. If you've got a question, We also want to hear from you. And if you are feeling really up to it and feeling really game, hit that link to StreamYard, which is already in the chat, and you can call in and we can have a chat and talk to you. The best interviews and episodes of Commanding the Narrative are the ones that are more interactive with you, the audience. So if you're out there, we want to hear from you. And it has been a crazy few weeks. It's like it's been a crazy few years. Things just seem to be intensifying more and more and more. Nothing seems to shock us anymore. Because the world is just, it seems like it's spiraling. I don't want to say it's spiraling out of control, but we're pretty close to that. And I've got a great guest tonight. So we're going to talk about all of that. We were actually going to speak about something else. Obviously, we're going to speak to Victor Dalziel tonight. Great writer and researcher. He'd written a great article about One Nation, which we're going to discuss. And then he wrote this new article called Wag the Dog. And I said, mate, this is what we're going to focus on tonight. We might get to the One Nation stuff, but I think the main focus tonight will be on his Wag the Dog article that we're going to be talking about momentarily. But before we get there, I want to let you know about how you can follow us and support us and keep up to date with everything that we're doing. And that's by heading to the website, commandingthenarrative.com. You'll find everything up there, all our previous podcasts. We've been doing some really good ones of late. Last week, I had Paul Vallejo on to talk about all things aliens and dimensional beings and ayahuasca and all sorts of stuff. We went everywhere. Past life regressions. That was a really great discussion. So check that one out. That's that alien disclosure one here. And the one before that was the tour of the Central West Iran Renewable Energy Zone. That was probably the most important podcast that I've done. It was actually more of a documentary, actually speaking to people out in these places like Dubbo and Dunedoo, Coolah, Wellington, and just asking their opinions about what those renewable projects are doing to them and their farmlands and their families and their whole communities. So if you are ever going to share a Commanding the Narrative podcast, that's the one. Please get that one out there and share that around. It's very, very important that people see what is happening out in our rural communities. If you want to read some of the articles that I might be writing or past newsletters, you can find it on the website as well. You can also find these surveys here if you want to contribute to those. And if you want to know who's coming up on the podcast this week, it's all up on the website. You'll find all the links and all the information and the guest that's going to appear. So it's all on the website, commandingthenarrative.com, and you can click the sign up button in the top right-hand corner and you'll get a newsletter at some point when I get around to writing one. I've been very, very busy of late, but we'll get there eventually. Also, if you want to contribute to Commanding the Narrative in a monetary form, throw us a few dollars. You can do that by heading to Buy Me a Coffee. It really helps us pay for the streaming services, the website, which are very, very expensive. And most importantly, it gives me a very warm and fuzzy feeling inside, which is much appreciated. So please head to Buy Me a Coffee. If you are listening on Rumble, there's also the Rumble tip jar where you can donate cryptocurrency. Not exactly sure how that one works, but I'm sure you'll figure it out if you want to go down that route. So any contribution really does help, and it keeps us going. And most of all, like, to know that people want to part with their hard-earned money to support me and to support Command the Narrative really does warm the heart. So if you can contribute in any sort of way, head to Buy Me a Coffee. And also, as I always let you know about Australians for Better Government, you can head to australiansforbetter.com. And just announced today, firstly, are you sick of the way that Australia is being governed? I think everyone is at the moment. They're sick of the way a lot of countries are being governed, but particularly in Australia. You can head to Australians for Better Government and find out all our proposals there. But we've got this event coming up, just announced today, as I said, in Cessnock at the East Cessnock Bowling Club on Sunday, the 3rd of May. We're going to be announcing speakers in the next few days and weeks. So stay tuned, head to the website. If you want to get your tickets early, you can get them right now by heading to Humanitix. Just head to the website, australiansforbetter.com, and you click the link to get your tickets. And we'd love to see you there in East Cessnock. If you're around the Hunter region or close by, we'd love to see you as well. And we hopefully have a lot more exciting news to talk about when it comes to Australians for Better Government as the weeks roll on. And just before we get to our guests, I'll also let you know that there is a new edition of the Light Australia newspaper out. You can head to the lightaustralia.com and sign up to be a distributor to get those newspapers out to the broader public. They are free for people to read, but it will cost you a little bit to get the papers printed so you can distribute them. But you can find all that information at the lightaustralia.com. All right. So as I said, the world is spiraling seemingly out of control. And to talk all about it, I'm going to welcome back a good friend of mine. I love speaking with him. He's a great writer, fabulous writer, one of the few writers that I actually read. He's a researcher, very well researched, and he's also a podcaster. And we've had him on the show a lot in the past. We've had some really great conversations. Haven't had him on for a long time, so I'm eager to get him back on and check what he's up to. Victor Dalziel, welcome back to Commanding the Narrative, mate.
Yeah, thank you very much for having me back on, Stephen. I really appreciate it.
No, mate, I appreciate you you coming on because I do really enjoy our conversations. I enjoy reading your article. I've alluded to it in the introduction there. It's this one here that you've put up on your Substack. If people want to head to victordalziel.substack.com, you'll find this article, Wag the Dog in 2026. And you've got this great AI image here. I don't know how you got that one, mate. That was really good. We're going to be going through this article tonight, but before we get there, I know there was a movie called Wag the Dog that I watched growing up, and that was all about them staging this event to take the focus off what was happening with the president. I think he was involved in some sexual scandal or something or other, and they put on this fake war to take the focus off that. So with that in mind, can you explain to the audience who might just be scratching their head, what does Wag the Dog mean? What are you talking about when you're discussing this in your article?
Well, I think what the Wag the Dog phrase means is normally the big dog itself. So the dog itself is representative of the politicians. It's representative of the government. And they like to think that they're the ones that are wagging the tail. They're the ones that are in charge. So wag the dog is like a bit of a term of phrase, meaning that the small tail, which is often some sort of political scandal, not always a sexual scandal, but often some sort of domestic scandal that is taking over wagging the dog. So i.e. the small scandal has taken over the government. And by the government, it means like conversation, things that are happening in the mainstream media, and the conversation more broadly in terms of particularly the President of the United States. It actually, doing a little bit of research during your intro, apparently it came up maybe in the 1800s, but it was, as you said, the movie in the 1990s with Dustin Hoffman and Robert De Niro that was released, believe it or not, a month before the Clinton and Lewinsky scandal broke, like 1 month before. And politicians are very sensitive about this phrase, because in the months after the Clinton scandal broke, he obviously went into or bombed Sudan. There was Iraq, there was the Kosovo War. And it was not lost on the media that often these bombing campaigns would occur when he was supposed to be appearing in the impeachment trial in regards to the Lewinsky, scandal. And so this happened over a period of about 2 years. And so it got to the point where the media itself was actually just straight out asking, is the president wagging the dog? So
and I remember that. I was only young, and I remember them saying, it was particularly Iraq. He was bombing Iraq or somewhere. And they were saying, is this just to take the focus off the Monica Lewinsky drama that was going on? Obviously, he didn't want the focus on that. He couldn't defend what happened. I mean, he even lied. He said that he didn't have that famous quote.
Had sexual relations.
Did not have sexual relations. Well, obviously he did.
With that woman. Yeah.
So, what better distraction than a big war? So, I mean, set the stage for this article that you've written. So you've explained Wag the Dog. What motivated you to write this article?
Well, it's like you said, there's so much going on just in terms of like everything in international relations right now. And since September 11th, and obviously even prior to that, there were some issues, but particularly since September 11th, the neocons in government in the US, they listed in a memo 7 countries that they wanted to conduct regime change in. And it was not necessarily that those countries had anything to do with 9/11. It was written that they were hostile to the United States. So in other words, they weren't under the thumb of the United States. And every single one of those countries, America has bombed, or excuse me, America or Israel have bombed or invaded. Obviously, the most prominent is Iraq and Syria. But number 7 on that list was Iran. And that's interesting because going back to that memo was released in November 2001. So obviously that's now 25 years ago. And so Iran's just been like bubbling around and bumping around ever since then for the last 25 years. So I just thought to myself, what is it that actually has created the condition so that both Netanyahu and Trump have decided that last weekend was the weekend after 25 years? And by the way, Bibi Netanyahu has been campaigning for regime change, or even just to, excuse the expression, bomb the shit out of Iran for the best part of the last 35 to 40 years. But I was just sitting there, I was just thinking, why now? Why after all this time, like 25 years since September 11, have they now chosen to go? And then it started to kind of dawn on me that what has been on the front page of the newspapers, what have they been talking about in nauseum on all of the media? And that is the Jeffrey Epstein file. And then I remembered Trump's famous quote from last year, where he said, "Are we still talking about that guy?" And I just thought, I think now is the perfect time for President Trump to wag the dog and basically do his bombing campaign in Iran as a way to wiping clean the slate in the media and to change the conversation. And then when I went with that thought, that's when I remembered that Bibi was actually also facing some pretty serious corruption charges in Israel. Forget everything for a second about what he's done with Gaza, but just even prior to that, so he was facing 10 years in prison. And Israel has surprisingly quite a long history of imprisoning presidents, prime ministers, defense ministers, powerful people, which I find quite surprising given their own history. But so what I'm saying is, it's not a pretend threat. It is potentially something that he could be imprisoned for. So what this is just kind of presented itself as this perfect opportunity. Now, it was interesting to hear Alex and Nick talking at the beginning. I almost wanted to just keep listening to what they had to say.
Mate, you should. I mean, no, an hour and a half is quite riveting. More just to listen how their opinions have skewed, and we'll get into a lot more later in the show. I've got a lot of that stuff lined up, but I've never heard, particularly Alex Jones, I've never heard him be so open about his criticism of Israel. He's normally very guarded of that, and Yeah. So, I mean, what's happening right now is really waking a lot of people up. I mean, we were talking about that off air about, what my journey since October 7th and basically being apathetic to this whole issue, to having, I guess, stronger views about it just by, watching what's been going on and what's being said. So I think a lot of people were on that journey, and I think it's a different world now. We're talking about Bill Clinton, in the 90s, and even this stuff was getting out in the media where people were saying, hey, is this just a wag the dog thing? But now with social media, we can see the footage of the attacks come in straight away. We've got a lot of online influencers out there who have obviously shifted away from Trump. And as I said, we'll talk about that a bit more. It's a faster news cycle. You can't get away with as much these days as what you potentially could have in the past, or at least I hope that's the case. So I think that's a big part of it. I mean, would you agree with that?
For sure. Like when I was researching for the article and I was listening to some of the reporters questioning Clinton, I just remember thinking, man, it almost seems like the 1990s were so much more innocent than what it is now. And you kind of touched in this in your introduction. It's almost now at a point where what we would normally expect to happen within a 1 year period is now happening within a 1 week period. And it's almost impossible to keep up with everything that's happening. But despite the speed at which things are happening, and to, I'm sure, Trump's great disdain, was the fact that the Epstein file, the Epstein issue, the Epstein story was not leaving the headlines at all. And his issue was that it was actually, in my opinion, it was building. It wasn't simply that it wasn't going away. It was that it was actually building. It was getting worse for him every single week.
Effect. It was a Streisand
for sure.
effect.
Yeah, like exactly. And I don't think that his, I don't even know how to describe these people, but like Pam Bondi and Kash Patel, so like his underlings, I guess, they're clearly some of the most, they're the worst actors I've ever seen, for one. Like they've been given a script, they've been given talking points, and they deliver them just so appallingly bad that it is so obvious that these people are not thinking and behaving by their own, by their own merit. They're being controlled, basically. And I think that always happens to a certain degree, of course, no matter what party's in power and no matter who these people are. But you would hope that they would have at least a little bit of themselves in what they say. But I don't think there's anything to Pam Bondi in particular. And I don't know what they've got on Kash Patel, but clearly they've got something on him. Because the guy, every time he's in front of the camera, I know, like whenever I do a podcast or whatever, it always starts out a little bit like nervous because you're excited, you got the adrenaline. But after about 5 minutes, you start to calm down, and then you have like a normal conversation, and you start to look into the camera and you connect. This guy just looks like a deer in the headlights the entire time. Like literally, like when he's being interviewed, even in friendly news networks like Fox, he's looking into the camera like they've got his beloved girlfriend with a gun to her head behind the camera. And nothing about them, nothing about anyone in that administration, other than, I've got a little bit of bias, RFK Jr. and that none of them come across as being people that are like authentically real, or that seem to have, when it comes to Pete Hegseth, like any sort of morality. And Marco, I think you mentioned Marco Rubio earlier as well. These people are really concerning, and I come from an international relations background. I don't come from a theology background, so I get a bit nervous talking about religion. But the thing that always amazes me, particularly about those two, is they are so like Christian. They're constantly selling their Christian values, their Christianhood, and the fact that they have a Bible group in the White House twice a week, and that they are God's people and all the rest of it. And I'm like, look, I don't know much about religion, but I'm pretty sure that killing is not high up on the list of things that Jesus would approve of. And when like Hegseth came out, I'm not sure if you saw the press conference. I think it was yesterday, or perhaps it was the day before. And like he literally said in the press conference, and I wrote the quote down, "We're going to punch them while they're down." I mean, like I grew up in a working class, household, with 4 brothers, and anyone that punched anyone while they were down were kind of described as being a bit of a dog, a bit of a coward. And so that sort of language. He also said that we're all in, and that kind of signifies that they might be planning to do some sort of like Venezuela sort of situation in Iran. I mean, I know that they still occupy perhaps a quarter of Syria. And of course, that quarter of Syria is the oil-rich part of Syria. It's also, one of the most stable in terms of like warfare, because Syria is still getting bombed almost daily by Israel, but not where the oil is. So the people around Trump, I don't understand any of them at all. And
it's disappointing because a lot of people had hope. I mean, before
I was one of them, actually. I feel quite like I don't feel embarrassed.
I'm calling them the X-Men because we're looking at these people going, "Hey, this is a great team that he's assembled."
Yeah, For me, this is going to sound a bit strange, but one of the biggest disappointments for me was Dan Bongino. Because like I wasn't always a massive fan of his, but because my podcast was always pretty much on Rumble, he was in my feed a lot. And look, I always found him like a little bit unnecessarily aggressive at times. But you know, like he's ex-military, so that didn't surprise me. But he talked up a really, really big game, Stephen, before he went into the FBI, and to see who he was before, who he was while he was in office, and who he is after he has come out is just so incredibly disappointing. And yes, I do feel a little bit like I was hoodwinked, because I think one of the we spoke about Trump the last time that I was on, and I was very optimistic about. No, I agree. He is a moron. No, I just read a comment that came up. I realize that now. But it's always easier to look at things and judge people in hindsight than what it is at the time. You have to make a judgment call, and I think in that sense, it's always important to remember that we were assessing Trump at a time where his competitor was Kamala Harris, and Joe Biden had been in office for 4 years, and 2 of those years he was basically just a corpse that was full of some sort of like upper drug that was keeping him on his feet. I mean, that man it was almost cruel what they did to him. So that at the time, that was who we were comparing Trump and his team to. And yes, they did a very good job with their propaganda, I have to say.
Well, we've got a good comment here from Dilemmas. Dilemma says the fact that Matt Gaetz didn't get confirmed as Attorney General tells you everything you need to know. I think that's a pretty good comment there. But let's dig into your article.
That was sad what they did to him. I remember reading about that scandal that they created around him. It was terrible.
Yeah, let's dig into your article, because you raised some interesting points, some of which you've already touched on. But you write here, it's hard to deny that both President Trump and Israeli Prime Minister Benjamin Netanyahu are at the center of major domestic scandals. Trump is still trying to stage manage the Jeffrey Epstein case, while Netanyahu remains caught up in a long-running corruption proceedings, which could, if he is ultimately convicted, result in a 10-year prison sentence. And Israel, it should be noted, is definitely not shy about sending former leaders to prison. Netanyahu's trial has already been delayed because of the Gaza war. Despite the delays, the allegations against him remain, and reports indicate that both Netanyahu and Trump are pressuring the Israeli president, Isaac Herzog, to preemptively grant a full pardon. Of course, there is also the minor issue of the International Criminal Court having issued an arrest warrant for Netanyahu over allegations of war crimes and crimes against humanity. So he's really up against it there. But what are the corruption allegations against Netanyahu? I haven't really heard too much about that. So what are these corruption allegations that he's meant to be standing trial for?
The corruption charges are interesting because it seems to be the behavior of largely his wife that is falling back onto him. And so there's just allegations of money but more importantly, very expensive gifts that have been given to both himself and I'm not sure if they call her the First Lady or whatever they call her. But most of it has been has been focused on her, but because he is the one that is in office and was making decisions based on those gifts. And what's really interesting is I have to use words, but that particular wording, like allegations, and it's been, have been made because you can't. But the fact is that they've even interviewed one of Trump's largest donors, Edelson, and she threw Netanyahu's wife under the bus. That testimony is there. It's just that you can't put a prime minister through a court case such as this while there is a war underway. And so it's in Netanyahu's interest to maintain a wartime situation, because once that settles down, then he can be called before the court. I also would like to mention that he has tried to change rulings within the court themselves and tried to change court powers in favour of the Prime Minister being able to override certain cases. And they're currently also looking at bringing back, I don't want to go too far away from the article, but bringing back the death penalty. And that is, the wording around that is truly terrifying, in the sense that it can be for people who have obviously murdered Israelis, but also people who are just considered enemies of the state. That's very vague wording, but I don't want to get away from what you're saying. You could probably put that visual back up again, because I think that was in terms of the allegations.
Yeah. So this one here. So you got the gifts affair, favourable coverage, and regulatory favours. So So look, I mean, there's a lot of a lot of stuff. Obviously, he wants the attention taken off from, but I don't feel like these people can run away from this stuff. It's always going to be there. And a comment that I saw the other day was that the internet never forgets. I mean, this stuff, once it goes up there, it's there forever, and no more can that be the truth than when it comes to Epstein. And even Trump has his own Republicans pushing for the Epstein files to be released, or more Epstein files to be released, including Thomas Massey. He's really ramped up the pressure, and he wants to get those files put out there. And he's actually even tweeting about you. You included some of his tweets in your article here. Where he wrote,
he's a good guy. He seems like a genuinely a good guy, and I rarely ever say that about politicians, but I will say that about him, and I'll also say it about Malcolm Roberts as well from One Nation. I think you can just, particularly when you like in Malcolm's case, when I've seen him speak like face to face and one-on-one, and I've met him, you can just tell, and I get that same sort of genuine vibe from Massey as well. But I'm very nervous about him, because I saw him on a podcast. Sorry, I'll let you just let me know if I'm taking over. But I saw Thomas on a podcast about 10 days ago. It was in America, and his body language and the way that he was speaking it's almost as if he's trying his hardest to do what he can, but he does see himself getting replaced this year.
Yeah, I was gonna talk about that. I mean, your articles are so rich in facts and different links and everything like that. You brought up the fact that he is one of the only politicians out there that didn't receive funding from AIPAC. And why that is significant. Now, a lot of Australians, they might not know AIPAC or the significance of AIPAC. I mean, just to put it into AI here, it says that the American Israel Public Affairs Committee is a powerful bipartisan lobby group in the US that advocates for strong, unconditional support of Israel, primarily by influencing Congress and funding political campaigns. It seeks to maintain deep US-Israel ties, military aid, and diplomatic protection, often using its affiliated Super PAC and United Democracy Project to support pro-Israel candidates. So it's openly saying that, if you're pro-Israel, then you're going to get funding and support from AIPAC. Now, the purpose of AIPAC is to lobby the US government to promote a close relationship between the US and Israel. It's considered highly influential on Capitol Hill, with its affiliated PAC spending over $100 million in recent election cycles to influence or challenge candidates critical of Israel. Its strategy, while historically a lobby group, it now directly invests in campaigns to support pro-Israel candidates and oppose those it deems critical of Israel. And AIPAC traditionally cultivates support from both Democrats and Republicans. So it's happy to support both parties, provided that they support their aims and their goals. Now, you might say, okay, well, that's just AI. If you then go to their actual website, it's not it's not like they're hiding this sort of stuff. So this is the AIPAC website, and it says the US Israel relationship makes America safer, stronger, and more prosperous. Well, I don't know how that works if they're going to war all the time. But AIPAC is a membership organization that brings together 6 million US citizens who commit their time and resources to ensuring the United States stands with our ally, and that elected officials who support this partnership are elected to Congress. So it's openly admitting that we are going to support pro-Israel candidates, and we're going to oppose the ones that are against Israel. And it says it further here. Lobbying for pro-Israel policies. We encourage the US government to enact specific policies to create a strong, enduring, and mutually beneficial relationship with our ally Israel. And if you click on the what are we lobbying for, you can see some of these ones in plain view on straight off their website. I'm reading straight off their website. Strengthening the US-Israeli relationship. Okay, fair enough. Supporting security assistance to Israel. Okay, so they want people to fight their wars with them, you might say. Promoting peace, countering Iran's aggression and nuclear weapons quest, combating terrorism, and opposing anti-Israel discrimination. So it's all there in plain view. But I mean, my big question is, if they're receiving money to the tune of $100 million to influence elections, I mean, how fair is that? I mean, should this be going on? You've got someone like Thomas Massey who says, okay, I'm not going to accept money from you guys, and then they campaign against him. How is that in the interests of the American people?
Oh, it's not. And they're not really even pretending that. The one thing that I would like to point out, which I always find quite interesting, particularly when you get responses like that from AI, is this is an Israel-backed lobby group, but they are not registered as a foreign lobby group. They're the only one that is not listed as a foreign lobby group. They are considered a domestic lobby organization, and that does matter because obviously when you're talking about the amount of money, hundreds of millions of dollars that are coming in, it doesn't really quite make sense, because if you just slip Israel out and you just put in Russia, right, and you say there's a lobby group in Washington who's lobbying on behalf of Russia, and they're spending $100 million to get the backing of congressmen and congresswomen in the US government, that raises some serious red flags immediately, even just switching out the names there. So it's interesting. And obviously there are a lot more rules and laws and regulations that apply to foreign lobby groups as opposed to domestic. So it's interesting to me that the AI, in its breakdown that you just gave there, which was quite accurate, did not mention the fact that it was not registered as a foreign lobby group. I think that is important. And for people that, I don't know whether your audience, from the comments that I've seen, are pretty switched on. When you're talking about a lobby group that is lobbying for an annual, basically, I don't know if they call it financial aid, but there is a retainer, let's just call it a retainer, that the US government pays to Israel for being its aircraft carrier in the Middle East. So this is a retainer that gets paid no matter what. And it fluctuates between 3 to 4 billion with a B. So those funds are like a non-negotiable check that just goes out annually. And then when there is conflicts such as the Gaza one, and obviously the one that's happening in Iran right now, then those funds get boosted. So you talk about $100 million, it's a lot of money, it certainly is, but out of that $100 million, they're getting at the very minimum 3 to 4 billion back. But I just have really major issues with a foreign nation who is able to pay into a lobby group which is registered somehow as a domestic lobby group, and that they're able to just openly buy. That's what they're doing. I've got to be careful. The AI that does my editing is constantly like correcting me about using words like corruption and things like that. Allegedly, I should say allegedly, but I mean, what other word really is there for it? For example, in Thomas Massey's
they're putting it on their own website.
Yeah.
They say it on their, I mean, it's open. I mean, it's not like you have to say allegedly. I mean,
it's not
I just read off their website.
Well, Trump has come out in terms of Thomas Massey and said, I don't like the guy. He's not going to be in office next year. We're spending millions. We're spending millions, but he's not spending millions. Let me go back to the article because it's interesting that the wording that that they use around that because, oh yeah, they say that Thomas Massey's competitor is attracting millions of dollars from out-of-state donors. That's the way they put it. So this is, and what I'm saying is that this guy's from Kentucky, right? You know, it's a small kind of state in the US, but he is receiving money. His competitor, excuse me, is receiving money from a foreign nation. Like, on what level does that make sense? On what level is that even right? And as your original question asked about the American people, I'm pretty sure from the polls, the fact that you said the internet, it never sleeps, people are waking up to this and they're like, nah, not on my watch. Not on my watch.
What if this money was coming from China or Russia or North Korea or somewhere like that? It'd be up in people would be up in arms.
First of all, they would have to register and it would have to be approved because it has to go through the foreign lobby process because that is very different from the domestic. They're able to just sponsor these people like willy-nilly, and when I say sponsor, I mean to the tune of 10, 12, 15 million dollars without having to answer to anyone because they're domestic lobby, and that's the real issue there. And you know, like, I can only hope that moving forward, you know, right now I think the only demographic group in the US that still supports Israel pretty much unconditionally is men, religious men over the age of 60. I think the poll said just about every other group is not supporting this sort of situation, and and people, they really get that, and they will twist that, and they'll say that it's anti-Semitic, and that means that people, you know, want the state of Israel to disappear, but that's not what people are saying. People are saying these groups like AIPAC and this control, as was it Alex or Nick that said in the introductory video that they're running Congress? I think it was Alex.
It was Alex, yeah.
Yeah.
Look, mate, I'm going to pull you up on something because you said that the commanding the narrative audience is switched on, and largely I agree with you, but you might want to wash your mouth out with soap when you hear this comment from Richard Storch, who says, "You both lack historical context, proportionally and perspective. How would most leaders, even great ones, stand to level of scrutiny that you are applying?" So, sounds like Richard's drunk.
Actually, it's
Richard,
really
the link to StreamYard's there, mate. Oh, please call in so I can yell at you. I would like that, but Victor might want to yell at you as well.
No, I think that we may have read the same article this afternoon. So when I'll rake my brain trying to think of who the author was. I'm sure it was an Australian. It was somewhere within Substack, and basically the author was saying that, sorry, Richard, but they were saying in their estimations, people like Donald Trump could, on a one-on-one basis, if you're going to sit down and have a beer with them, or you're going to sit down and have dinner with them, they're going to have amazing stories. They're going to be engaging. They're going to come across as a really nice person. And it wouldn't matter with Trump, you know, if you were white, if you were black, if you're Asian, Russian. He's the sort of guy that would sit down and connect with someone, and you'd walk away and I think you'd feel $1 million. But you've got to kind of filter that through the fact that he is now the leader of the most powerful military that has ever existed, and he's a nice guy, but he's also a businessman. Like, and it's clear to me that a lot of the decisions that he makes are based on business interests. It would be, I would think, acceptable if it was truly just America first, let's make America great again. But it too often lately has just kind of seemed like it's Trump and Trump's family first, and his crony mates in the Epstein files first, and everybody else just gets thrown some crumbs. But you can still say that about him and then at the same time say, well, yeah, I'd still like to sit down and have a beer with him. Like, yeah.
Well, let's talk
Also,
a little bit.
we're political commentators, so we're supposed to be harsh
We're
on
supposed to
people.
rile people up.
Otherwise, it'd
That's
be
the
pretty
whole point.
boring, right? Oh no, he's a great guy. Yeah. Iran, they're just evil, you know. Just bomb the shit out of them already.
Yeah,
you know?
that's right. Yeah, we're glad that Ayatollah is dead and blah blah blah. I mean, anyway, let's talk about
Ayatollah,
Trump.
by the way, people won't know this, but he was in his 80s. So I find it sometimes a bit distasteful that, you know, this celebration of we got the bastard, we took him down. He was, the accounts that are coming out of Iran is that he was actually in his office with the defense minister, with I think maybe 2 or 3 other generals. And within that same building were some of his family members who I spoke about in the article. It's it's always sad, right? But, you know, there was an 18-month-old.
Yeah, you're right. You write that at the end. You said it's also worth acknowledging the human cost of these events. During the strike that reportedly killed Ayatollah Ali Khamenei, members of his family, including his wife, the whole name. I
don't know how to say that either.
His daughter, son-in-law, and grandchild were also reportedly killed. So, look, I mean, some people are going to say, well, they're all evil, they all deserve to die. But when you're talking about a grandchild of someone, I mean, who was probably only a few years old.
No, it was 18 months old.
18 months, 18 months old. I mean, look, people will say collateral damage of war, blah, blah, blah. But this is why I guess I've become more and more of a pacifist as I've gone along in life, and particularly when I had kids. It's because I'm just sick of innocent people dying with these conflicts that just don't seem to benefit anyone. Like, why? I mean, they're saying that they went into Iran to stop the Iranians from launching or gaining nuclear weapons. But again, this sounds like weapons of mass destruction. We've been down this road before. And when is it going to end? I mean, they're already talking about forever war. We're in Afghanistan for 20 years. About 1 million or so people died in Iraq, supposedly. We don't want to see that again. People of the world are just getting sick of this stuff. And you talked about the younger generations particularly don't want to see this stuff anymore. We don't want to see these wars. And I think that's why it's aggravating a lot of people, including some of Trump's allies. And I asked Paul Vallejo the question on the podcast last week, does Trump really understand his base? I think I might change that question and say, does he actually care about his base? Because he's got former allies like, you might even say Thomas Massey, but even Marjorie Taylor Greene, who have just come along and quit because she can't, deal with Trump. And this was like related to the Epstein files. And Trump kicks her on the way out and says that she's a wacko and all these other things.
She's a traitor to the United States. And what's really interesting is if you ever get the chance, try and track down her. She did an interview when she was leaving, and I think it was just before Christmas. And she said that when she signed up to do this, she didn't sign up for what's happening to her now and what is potentially being threatened to happen to her. She spoke about threats to herself and her family. So, yeah, that was deeply disturbing. She basically stepped away and said, I didn't sign up for this. I signed up to make things better for my constituents. I signed up to try and make a difference. I didn't sign up to, whatever. I don't want to I'll paraphrase her and say that it was something along the lines of, I didn't sign up so that myself and my family could go through the threats and what we're going through right now.
Yeah.
So there obviously was, she was even, what I read from that is even on the way out the door, she was protecting Trump. Because she didn't want to come out and say the Zionists or Trump's people or whoever it was, she didn't want to come out and specifically label that, but it was clear that she was hinting to the fact that it was not really her decision to exit the building, that she was pushed because she dared to speak back. And I also think that Trump, being the little bit of an egotist that he is, there was a lot of talk, and I don't know where it came from, but it just exploded in October, November last year. And it was in the LA Times, it was everywhere, where she was being kind of sprouted as the next leader of the Republican Party that was going to run in 2028, because I think it has something to do with polling in swing voters. I think the people that were in the central, because she was coming out really strong at that time for healthcare, she didn't want to get rid of the healthcare that Trump was gutting at the time, because she had a member of the family that was sick. And she said that if they didn't have that healthcare that Trump was getting rid of, that they wouldn't have survived. And then the Epstein thing happened, and then she went up in the polls. And I'm almost certain there was a feature done on her in New York Times Magazine as well. So I think they were really framing her as the Trump apparent, or the heir apparent to Trump. And I don't know, like maybe that was part of the issue for Trump. I'm not sure. But when look. She wasn't the most articulate. Look, she actually reminds me quite a lot now that I'm thinking about it of Pauline. Because she's not always the most articulate. She's not always the most clearest. And sometimes some of her policy suggestions and her ideas I find just appalling. But you could just tell that it really did come from the heart with her. And she was trying hard. It's like Pauline. They always look like they're fighting, and they're not fighting for the elites. They're not fighting for anyone else. They're fighting for their people. And it's always sad to me, no matter what side of the aisle they sit on, when people who I think are like genuine, authentic people, full of morality, have to basically get shafted and sent out like that. Like, people forget that she was there from before he was elected the first time. Yeah. She was full MAGA. Yeah.
And a lot of them, not just his political allies, but even allies in the media, or the independent media, are starting to turn on him as well. People that were with him when it was unfashionable to be with him. So, for example, I've got some quotes here. This one's from Tucker Carlson. He said that it's absolutely disgusting and evil, and he says that this is Israel's war. So he's starting to speak out against this, and Trump even fired back at Tucker and had some comments against him. Alex Jones is calling Trump an errand boy of Israel and abandoning America first. I mean, that's one of the quotes there. And you can also, see some of the Candace Owens tweets, like this one here. She says, "Do not join or remain in the United States military. Trump has betrayed America and expects you to die for Israel. There is no honor in being led by dishonorable men to your death." So these are people that were hardcore Trump people that supported him all the way, including Nick Fuentes, who I've got this clip here, who's quite animated about supporting Trump back in the day compared to now. So I'll play this clip quickly.
"I wore this stupid hat. I wore this stupid fucking ridiculous hat when I was in college, like an idiot. When I was 18, I had people threatening to kick my ass. I wore this in the cafeteria. I became a pariah. And look at what it has profited all of us." They said, "No more endless wars." They said, "Tariffs, mate, we're going to win so big." They said, "We're going to build a wall. Mexico will pay for it. It just got 10 feet taller." It was a lie. It was a lie. And hindsight is 2020. All we can do is stop being suckers today. That's all we can do.
So, I mean, when you see something like that, I mean, I go back to my original question. Not only does Trump understand his base, does he care about his base? Because seemingly he's turned a lot of people against him, people that really were supporters of his for a long time.
Yeah. How good is Nick? Like, I definitely have podcaster envy every time he speaks, and he does that for 5 hours. That is extraordinary. He is so articulate, and he's not necessarily someone I agree with, but
exactly. Whether you agree with him or not, I mean, the bloke obviously is sharp as a tack, and he's very young. I don't know how he does it when he's that young, but
he's just so engaging. Like, you just want to watch him. You know what I mean? Like when he's on the screen, you can't help. He's one of those people. For me, that's the same with Candace Owens. Even though she might just be talking shit or something, you just want to engage with her because there's just something about them that draws you in. I just wanted to just make one more point about the people that that you're running through, who had turned on Trump, and it's interesting that Charlie Kirk is another one who met with Trump.
Right.
Oh, you know about So he met.
Well, no,
with Trump.
I know. With I mean, those allegations, I guess that Candace is putting out there that Charlie Kirk was allegedly receiving money from Israel lobbies, and then he started to speak out against Israel just before he died. So there's those allegations out there as well. So supposedly he was another one that was really turning on the narrative of supporting Israel, and he was against all these conflicts in the Middle East as well, from what I'm hearing.
No, 100%. So after, I don't know if you remember, there was I think they called it the 12-day war, something. There was that very short period where Israel, do you remember Trump? He got very aggressive. He was on the helicopter and they said to him, what do you think about Bibi bombing Iran? And it was almost like it caught by surprise. I mean, he swore, he said something like, you got to be effing kidding me or something. And then it turned into during that period, apparently, I don't know if Candace has said this, but I'm sure that Tucker has said it, is that Trump met with Charlie, because what a lot of people don't seem to realize about Charlie Kirk, they always say, well, who is this guy? Like, what's going on with him? But he was someone that was chosen, at a very young age to potentially be a future president. And his ability to connect with that key demographic of 18 to 30-year-olds was extraordinary. I mean, this is a guy that, when he says, go out and vote for Trump, we're talking about tens of millions of young men in particular just turning up and voting for Trump. So he had the power. And it seems like he may have been the one that spoke or whispered in Trump's ear and said, forget about Iran. It's going to be an absolute disaster. You're going to get bogged down like Afghanistan. It's going to be a PR disaster. And I think that the other thing that's really important about Iran that people don't really talk about is the fact that unlike Iraq and Afghanistan in particular, and also to a lesser degree Syria, but certainly in terms of Somalia and Sudan, when you're talking about a country that has a population of between 90 and 100 million people, but they've also got an international diaspora, which is huge. Everybody, I feel like, has come across a Persian or an Iranian in their lifetime. And so what that does is that creates a connection for people that they haven't necessarily had with people that are in other parts of the world that America has been bombing. And I for one, I studied with two guys from Iran, and one of them, and this is something you would never think of when you think about Iran, he has an organic tomato farm outside of Tehran. So, these are, so what I'm saying is I don't think this idea of, and Israel does this a lot with the Palestinians, this othering that they like to do with these people that, I think it was Noam Chomsky who wrote about this in Manufacturing Consent, where he talked about worthy victims and unworthy victims. It's a really key idea to what you were saying a little bit earlier in terms of you're sick of people being killed. Well, traditionally, the only people who really mattered to people in Western nations were other white Westerners. And I'm not talking about, this is not a race issue. What I'm saying is that when people you can slaughter, Bibi thinks that he can slaughter 72,000, in fact, I think it's approaching 75,000 Palestinians without anyone really caring.
Allegedly.
Excuse me, allegedly. Thank you, Stephen. Yeah, no, thanks for that. They think they can still get away with that because someone in your audience, again, and I shouldn't be reading the comments, but I can't help it. They mentioned the fact that the boomers, So the boomers are the ones that have this idea of worthy and unworthy victims, whereas now the rest of us who have grown up in multicultural societies, whether that's a good thing, bad thing, whatever, we've been exposed to multiple other cultures, and importantly in this case, we have been exposed to a lot of Persian people. And the ability for Trump and Bibi, I think, to get away with just recklessly bombing and killing Iranians is limited. And I don't know, for whatever reason, why their propaganda campaign just prior to the war, it was terrible. It completely fell apart within days. I mean, there was someone that the Guardian came out on the front page and said that 30,000 protesters had been killed, when in actual fact they're coming out now, and the official number may be it's still terrible, but as low as 1,500 to 1,800. And now it's also come out that those protesters were all linked via 300 modems or something that was supplied by Starlink by Elon Musk, because the regime had shut down the internet in Iran, and so they kept in contact via that. And then someone on TikTok, a Mossad agent, came out and was posting videos of themselves in the crowd and bragging that they had actually been the one that instigated the protests. It was, and then there was people that were apparently from the CIA. So all their propaganda leading up to the war also did not work. And then on the first day, not only was the leader, the Ayatollah, killed with his family, but they accidentally hit a girls' school, and there was 165 young girls, all aged between 7 and 12, that were killed. And I can't. Like you, I'm done. I'm done. Like I didn't believe. I thought it could have been propaganda that Iran was putting out about the girls' school, but it's been confirmed by multiple sources. That was actually the case. So I don't know how I went from Charlie Kirk to that, but what I'm saying is that Charlie Kirk was definitely like Nick. He was all the way with Trump, and he seemed to be wavering, like you said, long before everybody else was catching on. And that was probably why he ordered his own Doge. So he, I think it was about 3 months before he was assassinated, he had realized that there was some stuff going on financially within the organization that he was beyond him. And so he had gotten external people to come in to audit him, and his guide to them was to audit us like Doge is auditing the US government. You don't do that if you think everything's above board. So what I think I'm saying is that I feel like you're right about Israel, but I don't know that he knew that the money was coming in, or how and where it all was. And I think that when he found out, I think that's when things started to go a little bit pear-shaped for him.
We've got a caller. I want to get to the caller just quickly, but before we do, I just want to play, because I'm thankful of the audience bringing this up. I'd forgotten about this, where Trump made that famous comment. I'm going to play it for you now, just to refresh everyone's memory, because even I forgot about this.
That Iran violated the peace agreement, the ceasefire agreement. Do you believe that Iran is still committed to peace?
Yeah, I do. They violated it, but Israel violated it too.
Are you questioning if Israel was committed?
Israel, as soon as we made the deal, they came out and they dropped a load of bombs, the likes of which I've never seen before. The biggest load that we've seen. I'm not happy with Israel. You know, when I say, okay, now you have 12 hours, you don't go out in the first hour and just drop everything you have on them. So I'm not happy with them. I'm not happy with Iran either. But I'm really unhappy if Israel's going out this morning, because the one rocket that didn't land, that was shot, perhaps by mistake, that didn't land. I'm not happy about that. You know what? We basically have two countries that have been fighting so long and so hard that they don't know what the fuck they're doing. Do you understand that?
So, I mean, they always
talk
raw.
About,
yeah, they always talk about politics. Yeah, they always talk about. I mean, people. I've forgotten about that. I've completely forgotten about that.
Well,
So,
because I remember things like that because, like I'm a little bit autistic, but also because it was clearly a moment that a politician has slipped off script. And we, unfortunately, we don't get to witness that very often anymore. I mean, outside of Marjorie Taylor Greene, Thomas Massey, Pauline Hanson, people in the mainstream parties, the Republicans, the Democrats, the Labours, the Liberals, they do not go off script ever. And that was such a raw moment.
It shows how far we've come from that moment. And I've got a clip here. I won't play it because we'll get to our caller, where you've got all the clips of Trump saying we're not going to go to war. We're sick of war and blah blah blah. Iraq was a mistake. But before we could talk about that all night. But let's bring on our caller now, Mr. Richard Storch. This is going to be fun, mate. How are you?
Good evening, gentlemen.
Hey, Richard. First of all, I would also just like to acknowledge that Thomas Massey is a libertarian.
Oh, very good. Very good.
I did not mention that, and I should have mentioned that, yes.
Well, I'm being told I'm not a very good libertarian all the time, so there you go.
Yeah.
What did you want to say, Richard?
I just think that you can drill down into all this stuff, but there is an overriding issue, and that is a binary question of whether we want Iran to be a nuclear power or not. Forget about the regime and what that means for the world and all the future of humanity. And how much
evidence is there of that when Bibi Netanyahu has been talking about Iran becoming a nuclear power for the last 30 years? And I mean, you can watch all those clips where he's saying, oh, they're 2 weeks away, they're 4 weeks away, they're a few days away. He's been saying this for 30 years, mate.
You know something?
It's like weapons of mass destruction all over again.
I actually don't care about all those arguments because it's up to Iran to reassure everybody that they are not producing or researching or trying to develop.
Hang on. All right. Well, what about Israel, who have never admitted that they have nuclear weapons? You say that they do.
They've never denied it. In fact, they have something called the Samson Protocol, which is a stated policy of how to deploy them and use them.
But you just said that Iran should be transparent and they should say yes, we do, yet no, we don't. How come the same doesn't apply to Israel?
No, I'm just saying if they want to be left alone, that's what they could do. But if they don't want to do that, then they've got to expect what's coming.
Okay, so where does this go? Where does this end? Because
where this ends is where the world decides that it wants to ensure the future of humanity by removing a threat. And the threat is to Israel because Israel has nuclear weapons and the willingness to use them. That's the bottom line.
Isn't that the biggest threat to humanity?
Absolutely. So why make it a real
willing
threat?
To use nuclear weapons?
Yeah,
and we want to support that?
They will. If they're provoked, if they're attacked, they will use them. That's what's
so Richard, what about the theory of mutually assured destruction and the fact that
it doesn't apply in this instance? It doesn't apply in this instance.
Would you say that does apply in the Pakistan-India situation?
Vaguely, not completely.
Okay.
Vaguely.
But so you're not disagreeing with the idea that if there's two powerful countries that balance each other out in terms of nuclear weapons, that actually creates a condition of peace that wouldn't exist if. No, I'm asking you if you agree with that.
But you're making an assumption. You're assuming that there's sanity on both sides.
But that's where I think we do disagree, because having met people from Iran, I actually think they're just because they're Muslims, it doesn't mean that they're horrible people. They're actually the ones that I know irrelevant. And studied with.
That's entirely irrelevant. We're not talking about the common people. We're not talking about their religion. What we're talking about is a medieval theocratic viewpoint, which is very extreme and has already made commitments to destroy the state of Israel by any and all means.
Yep, but you started this conversation out by talking about the Samson option.
Yeah, the Samson protocol, it's not an option, it's a protocol. And what that means is that the Israelis are committed to defend themselves and fight to the last man. And they've demonstrated that commitment over and again. And therefore, it is foolish to presume that they will not execute that protocol. They have the means.
But Israel has a very long history of doing what I think that they label offensive defense. So does that not concern you a little bit?
It doesn't concern me or not concern me. It's irrelevant. The point is that they are entirely predictable, and we don't understand their mentality, which is very much a military mentality and very much based on how soldiers behave. And soldiers have to be willing. Soldiers have to be willing to fight to the last man to be effective. And Australians are not that different. I had this discussion with John Ruddock a couple of days ago. You know, you look at Australians in a defensive position like Kokoda, Tobruk, various aspects of the Greek campaign, Elands River. If Australians are cornered, they will fight to the last man quite happily.
But Richard, I mean, but tell me this. I mean, okay, you're making all these points, but what does any of this have to do with America? So
the point
if
is
Israel
that America has a duty to protect the world's future and the future of humanity, and the greatest threat to that is Iran provoking Israel.
Because Israel will nuke them. That's what you're saying.
I'm saying this is a very binary.
You're saying that Israel is going to be the ones doing all the nuking. That's what you're saying.
Yeah. And who do you think deals with the world in the aftermath? We do. It's an existential threat to humanity.
So your argument is that America needs to go in there and handle this situation because you've got Israel preparing and willing to fire nuclear weapons if they feel provoked enough. That America almost needs to lead this war just to calm the situation. Is that your argument?
No, it's not an argument. It's a reality. I'm not saying I like it or dislike it. I'm just saying that is the reality. It's a very binary situation.
Well, okay, what about this? Dilemmas has made a comment, and I'm going to turn it into a question. What is your view of the Greater Israel Project? Do you believe in it?
I don't believe that Israel has aspirations to conquer the entire Middle East. No, I think that's ridiculous.
What about the patches that the IDF wear on their uniforms that show Greater Israel?
I have no idea whether that's got any legitimacy, relevance, substance, anything. I mean, it's just a distraction.
Don't you think it's
the idea of Israel with 6 million Jews and 2 million Arabs conquering the entire Middle East and subjugating it is as absurd as an ant climbing up an elephant's leg with the intention of rape.
That's not the boundaries of Greater Israel, though.
Greater Israel goes to the Euphrates River and the Suez Canal and all sorts of other areas. I mean, it's just ridiculous. It's a dumb idea.
So you're basing what you're saying on the Hannibal Directive?
Sorry?
Are you basing what you're saying in terms of like Israel's potential behavior in terms of nuclear weapons on the Hannibal Directive?
The Hannibal Directive is another piece of propaganda where they shoot their own troops to prevent them being taken prisoner.
That's correct.
That's very debatable.
Well, it might be debatable, but I think it's not propaganda. It's actually like policy, because the policy. Yeah, I think in terms of like they ruled, they legislated to change it so that it could potentially include citizens.
Sure. I mean, when you're in a state of war for 85 years, you make some decisions which can be seen as being pretty questionable. But I don't see what relevance that's got to the bigger picture.
Richard, we can't, obviously, unfortunately, we can't talk all night about this, but we'll have you on the podcast again soon. But to, I guess, put a bow on all of this, is your argument that Israel is completely justified in bringing in America into this conflict in Iran, and that you're quite happy with what's going on at the moment?
No, I wouldn't put it in those terms, because I don't consider justification as part of the equation. It is what it is.
So it's happening. There doesn't have to be any justification for it. It's just happening, and people can't be critical, because you just before put the comment in the chat that Victor and I lack historical.
You do. I mean, if you would assess historical leaders by the same standards and the same scrutiny, imagine what you would uncover about Churchill or the Roosevelts or LBJ.
Yeah.
I mean,
we've done a little bit out on this podcast. I hope to do even more of that. But
I mean, JFK was the original mad ruler of all time. You know,
so what are you meant to do? Just throw your arms up in the air and say, "Oh well, it's happening. Let it happen. Let it happen." I just don't think, and I think Victor made this point. I think the younger generations are not going to be. They're not going to put up with that, and it seems that the most criticism of all this is coming from the younger generation.
Well, Stephen, the younger generations could be on a very steep learning curve. This year should be very educational for them. You know,
so Richard, can I just ask, do you take that stance in terms of the Epstein files as well?
Well, the Epstein files have not really produced anything terribly interesting yet, I don't think. So I'm still waiting to see what's actually, you know, very interesting in there. Seems to be a lot of gossip.
Well, Prince Andrew
I don't really care who reads
all his titles.
What?
Prince Andrew's just been arrested and stripped of all his titles, and wasn't that an implication of what was in the Epstein files?
Well, I mean, reputationally, he was always a dead man walking. So, I mean, this just speeded up the process, but it's still all gossip. You know, it's like, I mean, he was always a sleazebag, you know, Randy Andy. I mean, when we're the same age, and when we were 20, he was known as Randy Andy. And, you know, you can't tell me that every conquest he had was consensual. No one that's that prolific can claim consensual relations in every instance they've ever been in.
All right. On that note, we're going to let you go, Richard. We'll talk to you soon, all right? I don't think we're ever going to come to a resolution when it comes to this topic, as we have talked about this.
Oh yeah, we will. We will when the dust settles. It'll be clear then.
Right. Okay.
We'll come to a resolution. Don't worry.
There's a lot been happening in the world. We've got a lot to talk to you about. I want to hear your perspective on some other things, but we'll have you on again soon, probably very, very soon. Okay, mate? So we'll talk then.
Good to see you.
Thanks for calling in. Okay, Vic, I don't know how we get back on the rails again, but after all that, but I do want to play this clip because this ties into one of the points that you were making before about maybe this plan of going into all these countries has been on the table for quite some time. This is General Wesley Clark speaking on the 7 countries.
Right after 9/11, about 10 days after 9/11, I went through the Pentagon and I saw Secretary Rumsfeld and Deputy Secretary Wolfowitz. I went downstairs just to say hello to some of the people on the joint staff who had used to work for me. And one of the generals called me and he said, "Sir, you got to come in. You got to come in and talk to me a second." I said, "Well, you're too busy." He said, No. He says, "We've made the decision. We're going to war with Iraq." This was on or about the 20th of September. I said, "We're going to war with Iraq. Why?" He said, "I don't know." He said, "I guess they don't know what else to do." So I said, "Well, did they find some information connecting Saddam to Al-Qaeda?" He said, No. He says, there's nothing new that way. They just made the decision to go to war with Iraq. He said, I guess it's like we don't know what to do about terrorists, but we've got a good military and we can take down governments. And he said, I guess if the only tool you have is a hammer, every problem has to look like a nail. So I came back to see him a few weeks later. And by that time we were bombing in Afghanistan. I said, are we still going to war with Iraq? And he said, oh, it's worse than that. He said, he reached over on his desk, he picked up a piece of paper. He said, I just got this down from upstairs, meaning the Secretary of Defense office today. And he said, this is a memo that describes how we're going to take out 7 countries in 5 years, starting with Iraq and then Syria, Lebanon, Libya, Somalia, Sudan, and finishing off Iran. I said, is it classified? He said, yes, sir. I said, well, don't show it to me. And I saw him a year or so ago, and I said, you remember that? He said, sir, I didn't show you that memo. I didn't show it to you.
Okay, so that's the clip. Now, you've actually got some of the figures in your article, which I'll bring up. I brought these up before as well. These are the, and these might even be disputed. I thought Iraq was even more than this.
Just in order to not be super controversial, I went with the most conservative estimates. So if I went, I actually, because I didn't want people, because what happens sometimes when you write articles like this is people become fixated on really small details to pull apart and destroy the entire argument. So this was, so for example, with Iraq, the lowest figure that I could find was about 450,000. The highest was over 1 million. So I didn't want people to have that to hang on to as a way to pull apart the larger argument of the article. So these are very conservative numbers. Yeah.
Well, even off those conservative numbers, I mean, they're incredible numbers. You've got 461,000 in Iraq killed, 580,000 to 656,000 killed in Syria, 30,000 to 46,000 killed in Libya, more than 76,000 killed in Somalia, 400,000 killed in Sudan, Lebanon, 10,000 killed, almost 1 million displaced. Now, this is part of it as well. It's not just the people that are killed, and obviously people that are killed, they've got families, they've got lives that they were living, but it's also the people that are displaced. And Europe is complaining about all these Muslims coming into Europe, but they're coming into Europe because they've been displaced from these other war zones that were brought on by these conflicts. So, I mean, every action has an equal and opposite reaction. I mean, it's all flowing together, isn't it?
Yeah, I just want you to keep in mind, and listeners to keep in mind, that I'm working with the most conservative figures. If you could you just bring that back up, because there's something I just want. If you can just bring the death tolls back up and just scroll down to the sentence that's just below it, because I think that's going to play into what you were just saying.
Yeah.
So apart from, I mentioned Lebanon because they're a little bit separate from those other countries, and Iran is obviously, that's just kicked off. So, but from those 5 other countries, so that's Iraq, Syria, Libya, Somalia, and Sudan, we have conservatively 38 million people who have been displaced. And again, I went with the most conservative number. And so when people in Europe are certainly, and look, they're justified, particularly in terms of the numbers that have gone into some of the countries in Europe, because in Germany, we're not talking hundreds of thousands. Germany has absorbed millions. And a large number of those people are from Syria in particular. Libya is obviously a much smaller country just in terms of population and size, and a lot of those people are also from Iraq as well. Now, Iraq doesn't seem to get mentioned as much because I think that's down to the general collective guilt that both sides of the political parties feel in terms of what actually happened and transpired in Iraq. I think we can safely say, even though, interestingly, there has been some propaganda of late that's been coming out talking about that Iraq, actually, what happened there wasn't that bad. it actually turned out to be pretty good. But yeah, you're 100% right. If you want to know where all this problem of refugees and immigrations that have like spread throughout mainland Europe, but not just mainland Europe, also the UK, to a lesser degree Australia, but certainly into America as well. This is what they call it, the push and pull factors. If you're looking for the biggest push factor, it's going to be, I mean, you yourself, you're married, you've got young kids, you're a fighter, you're a strong person, and I don't doubt for a single second that you would want the best for your family and your kids. And if you're in Syria, the best option that you have is, particularly when they install a leader who's like a former Al-Qaeda, like the leader is a former Al-Qaeda operative, who there are multiple videos again on TikTok of him cutting the heads off children, a 12-year-old in the back of a ute. Like this level of brutality. So if you are someone that has a family, or if you are a young person and you have that sense of adventure and you want a better life, which we all do, Richard doesn't. He just wants to sit at home and just let it all blow over, apparently. But these people, they leave. And that is, in some regards, that's a perfectly normal human behavior. The issue that I think a lot of us have in terms of immigration is just the unchecked nature in which it is occurring, in terms of like just opening borders and letting millions of people, unknown people, undocumented people, unvetted people come through, is not the way that immigration should be done, because it's going to be the people at the bottom, the people that are struggling to pay the bills, the working class people, the people in the middle class, who are going to suffer the most when that sort of thing happens.
And this is the main point I want to get across to people. It's not like we're supporting one country over the other. I mean, what it all boils down to for me is the elites versus ordinary people. And
that's what I was trying to get with Richard in terms of the Epstein files, because that people talk about the Epstein and they want to throw it away. They want to disregard it as gossip and conspiracy. But what the Epstein files clearly does, in undebatable terms, in my belief, is that it clearly highlights that on this planet there is an elite class of people who think and believe that they are above the rest of us, that they can operate in everyday life in a way that is not only illegal but just absolutely disgraceful, that they can exploit us, they can use us.
They don't care what religion
you are.
They're
very colorblind.
Yeah.
They don't care. Scum. Yeah, and look, I don't want to say the word because I don't want you to get a strike or something, but there is a word that particularly Jewish people in power used a lot, and I think I forget the count, but it was thousands of times, and I think everyone knows the word that I'm referring to, and that word literally means like that everybody who is a non-Jew is there to serve a Jew, and like that's, that would be definitely classed as an anti-Semitic thing to say. But if you want to just move outside of that term, and that idea though is across the whole of the elite, the idea that we are just purely playthings.
I think the everyday Jews in Israel are cannon fodder as well. How would you like to live in a small little country in the Middle East and have, all these enemies around you that are only enemies because they're getting stirred up by your leadership and the people above you? I mean, it doesn't matter what, as I said, what race you are, what religion you are. I mean, I think we've got to move on from the us versus them thing and start to really work out what this really is. Yes, you're right. The Epstein files exposed that there are an elite group that think they're above everything. They can get away with everything. We kind of instinctively knew this already, but it's really been fleshed out with the Epstein files, and we're going to stop falling into the same traps. I mean, stop saying, the Jews want this, or the Muslims want that, or the Christians. I mean, we're all human beings, as you said. People of our generation have grown up in multicultural environments, and we've realized that, hey, old mate, Muhammad down the street's actually a pretty good guy, and when you go around to his house, his mum brings out a plate of food and wants to feed you nonstop, and you go over to your Jewish mate's house and they look after you, and your Chinese mate looks after you, and I mean, it all comes down to humanity. There's good people in every race, there's good people in every religion, and on the flip side, there's bad people, and they're generally at the top, unfortunately, in the elite class, and that's what I think we really ought to focus on in all of this. Whenever there's these big conflicts that happen in the world, the people that get fed into the meat grinder are the innocent families, the innocent people, the young kids. You talked about the poor 12-year-old that got his head chopped off. I mean, why do we want to live in what I mean, why can't we move on from that? Like, do we want a civilized society or not? Like, surely as a species, we've got to be moving on from this sort of stuff.
Yeah, and look, like you said, it's we've been very focused on Iran and Gaza, but let's talk about the Israeli people, right? I was trying to draw this out with Richard. So when I was talking about the Hannibal Directive and the fact that they had changed that, it's I don't know why Richard said it's propaganda. It's not propaganda, it's fact. So the original Hannibal Directive was that if somebody was an IDF soldier was going to be taken prisoner or hostage, the idea was that it was acceptable for another soldier to kill that soldier in order to prevent them from being taken hostage, because then that would give Hamas, Hezbollah, whatever, power. All right. Well, the important change that happened just prior to October 2023, not a conspiracy theory, fact, is they extended the Hannibal Directive to include citizens. So, I mean, you just need to, I paused them because I needed to pause for a second, because what I'm saying is that the soldiers, the Israeli government has stated that if a citizen is taken hostage and that situation can be prevented by killing the citizen, then an IDF soldier or a civilian with a gun is permitted to commit that killing. So yes, 100%. When you're talking about that, and I'm sure that if you went to the Israeli population and asked them what they think of this, I think a lot of them wouldn't be aware of it, first of all, because this idea that everybody over there is as engaged in politics, as what we are. It's like us. It's going to be a small group of people that are aware of legislation and laws and what's affecting them, and the vast majority of people completely unaware of that. So you're right. It is, again, this is a group of small elites who have decided that rather than to have to enter into a hostage agreement or put themselves or their military into a vulnerable position, they would prefer to just kill their own citizens.
Yeah, we've got a comment here from Chu. Chu says, we are all humans, in inverted commas, is an irrelevant argument. We are all part of a society that is separate from every other society, and most definitely certain societies are superior to others. Well, you know what makes them superior? The fact that they don't chop 12-year-olds' heads off, and they judge people by the content of their character, not the color of their skin. So I'm not going to fall into the trap of saying that other societies are this and that. I mean, I just think that's a ridiculous comment. The fact that separates us is we have the rule of law, and we judge people. That the justice is colorblind. I mean, we're not favoring any particular group or ethnicity or religion, and we all want to be free and happy. And I mean, this is just part of the ploy as well. People are getting caught up in emotion and what have you. But at the end of the day, no one wants missiles flying above them and bombs dropping above them. I mean, we really need to move away from this. I know we've been talking a lot tonight, and I want to try and cram in.
I just want to say on that point, like it's kind of a bit along the lines of what was said before about like just let it play out. There's a real problem with just letting things like that play out, particularly when we have a very public list of 7 countries that needed to be dealt with after 9/11. And now we have reached number 7. So the important thing to remember about that is that where does this go? Where do the military industrial complex, where does it go next? Where does it focus next? Because they've set pretty much the whole of the Middle East on fire. They've gone from one country to the next. You need to think ahead. These people really don't care about humanity. So, where's next? And I'm not suggesting for a single second that Australia is next, but it could be one of our neighbors. And then what does that actually mean for us? So, where people, like, for example, there's a bit of a push to focus on China and the Taiwan issue. Well, if that blows up, do people actually realize that China is our #1 trading partner? I mean, I don't think the US is even in the top 5. I would doubt that it's even in the top 10 after Trump's sanctions. But, we need to think about these things. It's like that old saying, they came for this person and I did nothing. They came for that person, I did nothing. It's the same situation here. If you don't stand up, if you don't speak up, who's next?
Yeah. All right. One last clip before we move on to. I quickly want to get your comments about your One Nation article as well. If I can twist your arm and squeeze some more time out of you. But I want to
change of tact. Yeah.
I know. I just quickly, before we finish on this, I want to play one more clip from Nick Fuentes because I want to ask you about the youth and how they're going to react to this. Before we get to that, let's hear from Nick Fuentes again.
Because let me be perfectly honest with you. If all we're playing for is better than the Democrats, I will quit politics. Like, who would ever sacrifice anything for that? Look at how fucked up our country is. Our country is a joke. Everything that actually matters, the fundamentals are all broken. Okay. The social fabric is broken. Diversity is killing us. Crime is rampant. This country is just depressing. It's a dead, depressing, hollow place to live. Everybody's miserable. Everyone recognizes everything's getting worse. I don't think there's anybody that really believes we'll even still be here in 100 years, that this country will still exist. Is that really what we're playing for in this context? Is we want to have policies that are exactly the same as the Democrats, but like a little bit better? At least it's a little bit better. That's the grand prize. Because if someone had told me 10 years ago, that's what we can hope for, I don't know, maybe I would have finished my degree. Maybe I would have just became a lawyer and like had a lot of fun or something. That's what we're playing for.
So my interpretation of that is probably what explains why a lot of people are apathetic to politics, because they just feel like, are we really getting any change? Are we really getting much difference between the two parties? And I think that ties into what's happening here in this country with the Labor Party and the Liberal Party. And that overflows into what we're hopefully going to be quickly talking about with your One Nation article. He's come to the point where he's like, what's the point of getting involved in politics if we're not going to get the change that we want, the revolutionary change that he's calling for? He's a person that's very young. He's still in his 20s. I mean, my big question to you, Victor, is how is the younger generations going to react to all of this? We know that when big things happen like this, it does have an effect, but we don't see it straight away. It's going to happen generations into the future. I know you don't have a crystal ball and it's hard to predict things, but your gut feel on how this plays out with some of the younger generations. We're already seeing some of the influencers already turn on Trump. But what are your thoughts?
Well, I just think that the mask is down. I agree with Richard. My history is not great, but from what I genuinely feel is I don't necessarily think that this idea of the uni party is a brand new one. I think that it has been that situation for a very long time. There are key differences that they focus on, and they hyperfixate on those differences. But vastly, I think they moved together. The difference is that I think what used to exist in America and Australia and the UK in particular was that even though they did have their differences and they were a bit of a uni party, let's be honest, they shared a lot of morals and values and beliefs. And I think the trajectory was to move the country forward. And what I think is different now, and certainly changed in the last 10 to 20 years, is it's no longer about this collective idea of a state or a country. It's more about this individual idea of like, I want to move myself forward. I want to build some sort of like legacy. I want to get richer. I want to be more powerful. And so that shift from how can we move together and build something big and beautiful and strong together, as opposed to like, I'm going to focus on myself and I'm going to build my legacy and what I'm about. And I think that that's been the biggest shift. The young people, it's an interesting argument. I think it's quite transparent that particularly in the United States and across Europe, they're very nervous about the direction that young people are moving in. And it's a bit cliche to talk about TikTok and young people, but I can't help but do it, considering that in the US, Trump forced ByteDance, in the Chinese company that controlled TikTok, to sell the majority of its company to Larry Ellison. And Larry Ellison is, of course, the largest individual donor to the IDF. So the Citizens for the IDF, it's a charity. He's donated millions to that. And so the idea behind him taking control of TikTok, or his company, is that they are going to try and control the propaganda and the rhetoric, because that platform in particular has been the most problematic in terms of Gaza, Lebanon, and Syria. So I think what they're hoping is that they're going to get control of the platforms, and then once they control that, they'll be able to control the narrative again. But I feel like it's too late to go back now. And I hate to harp on about the Epstein files, but the young people that I work with and that are in my social circles, they're obsessed with the Epstein files, because it's like you said, we always knew that this existed. And okay, sure, I agree with Richard. A lot of it is gossipy, but a lot of it is very serious. And what it really highlights is this unipolar party system, and also it highlights the power of, like, this. I think it was Alex Jones that talked about the globalists. Like, this is clearly, it highlights elitism, globalism, uniparty. And I think it's really breeding a lot of apathy in young people, because they're realizing that it doesn't really matter who you vote for. It's going to be the same outcome anyway. And when you talk about outcomes in terms of what I was saying just before, about it's no longer about what's best for the country or best for whatever, it's now what's best for me. And you see that, like, on steroids with the Kushners and the Trumps and everyone else. And like I said, it's almost like they're not even hiding it anymore. Like, they're so disrespectful to us, and they have so much power, and they feel like they're so immune to being held to account, that they're not even really bothering to hide it anymore, because they kind of know that we don't have a choice. And the other thing that I would say about what I just want to touch on what Nick said. What he was kind of alluding to is the idea that the American empire is collapsing, and that's in the final stages, or it's starting the collapse now. So what they're doing is they're getting desperate, and they're trying to do all these land grabs, the resource grabs, and all the rest of it, to try and keep it going. But it's really important what he said about the state of American cities. And I'm someone that has visited America multiple times, and I've seen a really horrible decline in the state of their public spaces, in terms of like parks and streets and just buildings in general. No one really kind of looks after like these areas, particularly in, strangely enough, I don't know, a lot of people talk about this, but California is an absolute mess. But what that does is, I think it should highlight to people who play into the propaganda about foreign wars, that the Americans in particular are going in to help and liberate and free the people and help the people. Well, if you can't look after your own domestic population, and you clearly don't give a shit about them, why are you trying to convince us that you care about the women in hijabs in Iran?
And I think it's also like, as I said before, like I had that clip of Trump talking about, no more wars, and we're not going to be doing these endless wars anymore. And a lot of people gravitated to him because of that, because he was the anti-war president. And suddenly
he was, yeah.
We're in Iran, and people were looking at it and scratching their heads and going, hey, it feels like he's like Bill Clinton or George W. Bush. It's the same thing. We're there again, and it doesn't matter what face you put on a president. They all seem to do the same actions. And I think that's where the biggest betrayal comes from, because they really did think that Trump was different, but they're getting the same outcome.
Yeah. But if you want to segue into the article, one way that we could do that is I'm not like completely depressed about the future. What I'm hoping will happen, and what I believe is already starting to happen, is that with this knowledge, with the mask coming down, with no one pretending and people accepting now and knowing and just kind of feeling that what they always thought was true is actually true, we're going to hopefully see the emergence of fresh, new political parties, political figures, and people who are outside of organizations like APEC, and even political parties. And I think, I mean, people like to say that Australia is 10 years behind the rest of the world, but I'm not so convinced about that when it comes to Australian politics. And I know that you and Richard are the politics experts, so I don't want to go out of my depth. But it seems to me that what's happening with the Liberal Party is actually something that might happen to the rest of the world, in terms of like we're seeing a party literally like and very slowly disintegrate in front of our eyes. And they've gone into full-on panic mode. And what we've seen is this emergence of course, One Nation is not a new party, but you know, it has a lot of new ideas and a lot of new energy about it. And and I think that we might see that all around the world. And I think that as long as One Nation stays true and potentially recruits some younger people, that could be the way forward.
I did want to talk to you, and I know you're probably starving by now. And
I'm not angry yet, so I'm not hungry yet. Yeah.
But I did want to talk to you about this article because, I mean, I do. Well, one of the reasons I want to talk about it is to direct people to your Substack so they can follow you on Substack, because you're at the very least thought-provoking, and people might not always agree with what you're saying. We're talking about very, very complex issues, and we can't always be right, but we're putting these ideas and discussions out there to at least spark the debate. So please head to Victor's Substack and subscribe. This is another article that he's written called Meet the Nepo Babies of Australia's Political Class, which might go over the top of some people's heads of what that exactly means. But you're writing about the rise of One Nation. And initially, I did want to talk to you about this article because I wanted to push back on some of the things that you were saying in regards to One Nation. But one of the things I will quickly push back on you is what you just said, how the disintegration of the Liberal Party might be a first in the world. I think you need to look to the UK and what happened there with the Tories and the rise of Reform. It seems more similar to what happened there, and that I think the UK are ahead of us in that regard, where the Conservative Party, they fell apart. The Reform's basically taking their place. Reform hasn't been around as long as One Nation, but Nigel Farage has, and he's definitely the figurehead of Reform. But what we're seeing now with Reform is that some of their support is starting to fragment, with Rupert Lowe, who's doing some very, very professional clips on X. He started Restore Britain. He's starting to splinter off some support, but also Ben Habib, who started the Advance. I'm pretty sure it's Advance Britain Party. They're actually seeing more rapid growth than Reform at the moment. So that's a little bit of a crystal ball of what's happening there in the UK. But when let's bring it back to One Nation. So this article that you wrote about One Nation and the Nepo babies of Australia's political class, what exactly did you mean by that, and what point were you trying to get across?
This article actually started out as me being a bit pissed off with Hollywood, because I'm someone that used to go to the cinema every single Sunday night and watch, a late release movie back in the times when, every week there was between 6 to 10 movies that were released. And there just has been so long since there's been anything good at the cinema. And even in terms of the streamers, I just cancelled all my subscribers because it's just become so neutral, so boring, and just so derivative. And so then I started to look into why is this happening, and then I just couldn't believe the number of Nepo babies. And by the way, I'm sure people know this, but Nepo babies is a term that describes someone who is like a second, third, fourth, or fifth generation person who takes advantages of all the contacts that they get from being born with their name. A bit like a modern day royalty, basically. So, mum and dad were famous. They were born like the Beckhams, for example, and they're famous for being famous. And they get a bit bored, and so they might go and dabble in music, or they might go and dabble and make a movie or TV show. And the article talks about the fact that people don't really read much into it. They don't think much about it because they think it's only a few, but there's actually thousands now, and just in terms of Hollywood. And of course, every time someone who is a Nepo baby gets hired, and sometimes they may be the best person for the job, it means that someone who hasn't come from that background, someone who's out there just pounding the streets trying to get a break, misses out. And what I did is then I started to, because at the same time I was reading about this insane and literally unprecedented rise in support for One Nation. And I always like to, when I make claims like that, I always like to link to sources who are kind of the enemy of the idea. So that idea that One Nation's rise in popularity is unprecedented in modern Australian politics, I believe was the direct quote, is actually from the ABC. They did a huge article that just goes on for pages that tries to break this down and analyze it. And so what I did is I kind of thought about, well, where is Australia's political class? Because as I said before, Richard and Stephen are the politics guys. I'm more of a all-rounder. And I was shocked, like I was genuinely shocked by some of the people, the background of some of our political leaders who, when they were campaigning, and I remember the campaigns, we spoke about it at times, Stephen, yeah. And so I knew who these people were. But I didn't realize, for example, that some of the Teals who sold themselves as being like fresh and like they're powerful and they're wonderful because they're women and they're, all the rest of it. One of them's a fifth generation politician, fifth generation. So again, this comes back to the elites, like the face and the outfits changed. It's gone from being the son to the daughter, but those families are still in power. And I was astonished in terms of just how much power some of these people who are ruling over us actually have. And I think, yeah, you've highlighted Allegra Spender, who's probably one of the most famous Nepo babies. There was another one that's probably got
Kate
more
Chaney.
of a...
Kate Chaney was the one where the lineage reportedly dates back to 1877.
1877. I had to write that in there. And I got it confirmed from two different sources. But Allegra is like the perfect example. Her grandfather was a president of the International Court of Justice. He also served in the federal government here in Australia. So did her father. And of course, her mother was Carla Zambatti, one of Australia's most famous and internationally successful fashion designers. And I think I say down there that both Catherine and Allegra were substantially supported by Simon Holmes a Court, who is the son of Australia's first ever billionaire. And it's just like it's Nepo babies all round. And look, the argument that the article is making is not that these people are inherently bad or that that they're evil people. By the way, none of these people are in the Epstein files. What I'm simply saying is that people like this come from a very different background from the vast majority of Australians. And because the way that Australia is in terms of our cities are planned now, you can have a situation where people like Allegra Spender, they can live in a very much a bubble and never get exposed to like working class people or working class way of life or even a middle class way of life. They talk the talk in terms of like, oh, there's a cost of living crisis, there's a housing crisis. But when it comes down to it, they don't actually understand what that feels like and what that is. And they also tend to focus and fixate on issues that for, I think you and me, Stephen, like, okay, so perhaps like it's a nice idea, right, to protect the environments of the world. But it's also really nice to have 3 meals a day and to be able to pay your mortgage and your bills. And that's probably, for me, like a little bit more important than a river in the Amazon. And I want the Amazon to be healthy because everyone's healthy. But what I'm saying is that they fixate actually on that top bit Maslow's hierarchy of needs. I put that in. I know it seems a little bit out of place, but most people know Maslow's. So what I tried to do was slot in political priorities in terms of the electorate into each of his needs. And yeah, my argument from this was that the Nepo babies are focused very much on what they call post-material issues. So that is climate change and global justice and international law, because that's generally someone who, from the time they were born, they've just had extreme privilege. And so for them, they're really like, it's this almost like comic book idea of like they want to save the world. Whereas people like Pauline, Malcolm, you and me have grown up, and we really have needed to focus on safety needs like shelter and physiological needs as well. Yeah.
Paying the bills, putting food on the table, being an everyday person. So that's your point, that, I mean, One Nation's a more everyday people type of party, which actually understand the needs and wants of the electorate, whereas these Nepo babies, as you call them, these upper elites, they come across as, oh, nice fluffy teal independents, but really when you dig into it, they're just part of the same political class that have been ruling over us all the way since 1877 or
1877.
I mean,
but it's not just about where they choose to focus their policies. For me, it's also about having politicians and people that stand up who understand and know the life that we live. And the fact that so many people, it seems, within the One Nation Party have worked in retail, worked in hospitality, worked in coal mining, obviously famously owned a fish and chip shop, or have been a bouncer, or just like even just being an accountant or something, something that we can relate to, and that means that they actually understand the day-to-day realities of life. They don't just virtue signal at us constantly while trying to create again this legacy. Like some of these Nepo babies in Australian politics have, like, they went to university, they went to these expensive private schools, they went to University of Sydney, but not just that, they would then go to Harvard for postgraduate studies, Oxford, Cambridge. They work for some of the biggest companies on the planet. They've got all these connections with mum and dad. And it's like, how on earth do they understand what the everyday realities are for us? And it's not about,
No, one of the things I've been discussing on this podcast in recent times, especially since the rise in the polls of One Nation, is that for me, it doesn't seem organic. It seems almost fabricated. And I'm talking to people that are still within One Nation, and they're telling me that what they're seeing on the ground, it is very organic. They're seeing more and more people come to branch meetings. There definitely is evidence of more and more support for the party. When I say it's fabricated, I think it's more coming from the media side of things. They're really trying to pump up the tires of One Nation to get people to support it. And the reason I'm saying it's fabricated, because there was an old saying, and John Howard used to say this, a lot of politicians have said it, you can't fatten the pig on market day, which means you can't just suddenly turn polling around. It takes time. At the end of 2024, Pauline Hanson was voted as the most unpopular person, most unpopular politician in Australia. At the end of 2025, she's being voted as the most popular politician in all of Australia. How does that happen? How does that flip in such a small space of time? And where does this resurgence or this surge in One Nation support come from when they really haven't done anything different? I mean, people say, well, that's the point. You know, they have been sticking by their guns for the last 30 years, and that's the reason why people are starting to wake up. But I just don't buy that. So I'm interested from your perspective, because one of the first times we talked to you, you were telling us about how you used to be on the far left. COVID woke you up and you had this, come to Jesus type of thing. But I'm just assuming that you, in previous times, you didn't have a favorable opinion of Pauline Hanson. Am I right in that? And has that changed over time? And how quickly was that change, if there was a change for you?
So there's two questions there. It's has my opinion of Pauline changed, and why is it that One Nation has shot up
Firstly, has your opinion of Pauline Hanson changed, and how quickly did it take for you to change, if it did change?
So I don't know if my opinion of Pauline Hanson as a person was ever as negative as what the media makes out. As what people would think. Pauline is someone that, when you come from my background, because we've spoken about this, because, like, I'm from a working class poor background, even though I sound like a stuck up university snob, I've absorbed way too much of their bullshit over the years, and my brothers give me shit. All four of my brothers are tradies. It doesn't, I can't help the way I sound. I was going to say to you before, I'm a much better writer than I am speaker. Yeah. And Pauline, to me, always sounded like the people I grew up with or grew up around. She wasn't the most articulate person. She had some strange views, but strangely enough, a lot of those views were shared again with the people that I grew up with. I feel like she just didn't have that polish, and sometimes the people, particularly in politics, because it is, rightly or wrongly, it is very elitist actually, and it's just like law and medicine. If you get someone that kind of brushes up against rules, like unwritten rules of behavior and expression, and even dress, and just in terms of like the tone of her voice and the certain phrases that she would use, obviously, they really killed her for that. But in terms of like her policies, I was never really a fan of her back in the 1990s when she first came out. But I'm not going to like beat myself up too much about that, because I think that over the years, she's both become a bit softer, I think, in terms of policy, but she's also become a little bit more professional. And even though she still likes to pull her stunts, which I don't know how, we talk about organic, I don't know how organic her stunts are. I don't know if this is like her James is telling her to do that because they need some media coverage. I don't know what that is. But yeah, you're right. My opinion of her has certainly evolved. But my opinion of her has evolved because she's also evolved. And
do you think so?
I do. Yeah, I really do. And let me tell you the biggest thing that I think that has evolved in terms of Pauline in particular, but I would also argue in terms of some of the other people in her party. I feel like she had something that's called imposter syndrome when she first got elected in the late 1990s. I feel like she wanted to be there, and what's the one from Tasmania? The independent down there, Jackie Lambie. She said that she suffered from this in her first term as well, that she wanted to be there. But she felt like she didn't belong. She felt like she was kind of breaking the rules by being there. And sometimes she would ask colleagues for like advice or whatever, and they wouldn't be very forthcoming because she was made to feel like she didn't belong. In fact, Jackie Lambie has written an article for, I think it was The Australian, where she specifically talks about the elitism in Australian politics at the federal level in particular. And I feel like a bit of that came from Pauline. There was a lot of nervousness and a lot of insecurity in the way she presented herself the first time around. But I think both her and Jackie have really grown and have now, they believe that they belong there, and they believe that they deserve to be there. They believe that their voice is valid and it should be heard. And in Pauline's case, I think that she now genuinely believes in herself and that she can lead a political party. I think it was an idea. I think she was like trying to attract a certain type of voter, and she was a bit clumsy about it. And like I said, there's definitely been an uptick in her professionalism. It doesn't mean that she's become like them, but she just, you can see, I can hear in her voice that she believes that she belongs there. And I write about this a little bit in the article, not a lot, but that idea, that belief that she has, and that some of, like Barnaby obviously has as well, that can be almost insulting to elite people, you know, because they talk about their tokenism, they talk about their DEI, and the Teals would be all over that shit. like diversity, equity, inclusion. But when they, she's not that bad. Sorry, I just saw a comment. She's all right. I have to agree. Sometimes she can be a bit off. But yeah, I've lost my train of thought now. That's why I said to you I shouldn't read comments.
No, you're making the point which you made in the article that she doesn't get the diversity card played towards her. She's a woman leading the party that's surging in the polls, and her chief of staff, which a lot of people say is the chief, puppeteer, puppet master, is a homosexual. So you've got this party with a woman and a gay guy running the show, and the left never give them credit for that. Whereas,
but don't forget that what they call low socioeconomic background is also one of those. So she's got intersectionality.
I don't even know what that is.
It's when you have multiple victim status, right?
Oh, okay.
But she's not got victim status, but that's my cheeky way of putting it. So when you've got like a black lesbian who's trans and so the more badges you can put on, the more higher you go up in the DEI.
See, I don't understand that stuff because I'm a white male, so I'm like the complete opposite to, and I'm straight as well, so I don't stand a
Look
chance.
out. Yeah. You can't apply for a job at any university right now. Sorry.
Shoot me at the door. All right, mate. Look, I really appreciated you coming on and discussing all this stuff tonight. I mean, it was some heavy stuff. And as I said, we can't always be correct, but at least we're starting the discussion and talking about this stuff. And I really do encourage everyone to go to your Substack and read your articles because they're very well researched. They're backed up by a lot of links and evidence. So, I don't really read much. I don't like reading. I tend to get my information more from podcasts, but when I do get your articles, I find I read them all the way to the end, and I'm even read them a couple of times through. So I really enjoy writing. I'm sure the audience will as well. 84 Punk says, I've really enjoyed hearing Victor's perspective. So there you go, mate. You've made a fan there. And I know a lot of other people were saying, thanking me for getting you on tonight and hear from you. Again, another comment, good guest. Thanks, Victor. So, mate, I really appreciate it. Is your Substack the best place to go for people to follow you and keep up to date with all your work?
Yeah, for now. Absolutely.
Yeah. And you're not going to get in the podcasting game again? I know your podcasts were very good back in the day. You're not getting the itch for it again?
I 100% have got the itch back again. I'm a bit rusty, but today was great, a little practice for me. But I think probably maybe a couple of months away, the podcast will be kicking off again. And I may even forgive YouTube and perhaps go back on YouTube.
YouTube's been pretty good, actually, and surprisingly, Facebook's come around as well. I hope I'm not. I better touch wood or something like that, and hopefully, I'm not jinxing myself. But it seems like some of the platforms since Elon Musk took over X, some of the other platforms have had to come around on their policies a little bit. So for now, I mean, they've been playing nice, but that you never know for sure. But that's why people, I guess, should go straight to your Substack, go straight to commandingthenarrative.com. Don't always rely on social media, like I always say. But, mate, it's been a pleasure. Hopefully we can do it all again soon. And we'll keep in touch as always, mate. Thank you so much for coming on.
No, I really appreciate it. Thanks, Stephen. And thank you to Richard for dropping in as well. It's good to see him again. It's been a while. Yeah.
Yeah, well, he's always one to stir people up. But like for everyone else, thank you for watching as well. We got a lot of interaction in the comments tonight. Thank you for all your contributions. And as I said, please head to the website and hopefully we can have more thought-provoking topics and discussions like we have tonight. But for now, we'll see you all next time. Bye-bye.